Welcome in, everybody, to a new episode of All Things NBA from A to Z. I'm Chris Persianen here alongside Zach Noble and a very special guest for today's team preview. We've got Law Murray, Clippers reporter for The Athletic, joining us on the road from as far west as you can get in the U.S. Law,
That's
tell us a
right.
little bit about where you're at. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks for taking the time, especially with where you are. Give us a little intro to where you're at right now.
Yeah, I'm in Honolulu. Sun is bright as ever, and it's my first time out here in the middle of the Pacific like this. So I'm really blessed that my career has helped me get to the spot, and really looking forward to the start of the season, start of camp, preseason games. I love preseason. I know fans might not, but you can always tell the casuals from the ones who really like any bit of hoop.
Oh yeah.
Like, if you're a real fiend, this is the best time of the year. You get to, like, forget the what was it? Who we play for? That week one. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the board game who we play for when you got preseason.
No, I was gonna be like, what's the vibe in Hawaii? You've been there 2-3 days now, and what's it been
I
like
ain't been
around
here
the
long
team?
enough.
And no, I
Yeah,
love it, man. No, I'm envious.
yeah.
I've been to 48 states, and Hawaii and Alaska are the last two I got to get to. And
Really?
yeah, no, I'd be open to living there someday too. I love that. Love the
Yeah, I don't
looks.
know how
Love,
many.
love the vibe.
I don't know how many states I've checked off. I'm probably in the 30s, and I'd love to get to Alaska too, mainly because I like to eat. So I gotta go there one
You like
time to
some
eat.
fish?
I love, like, really strange sky locations. So, I don't know how long those days are supposed to be in Alaska. I try to get there, but
They're long as
I
hell.
mean,
I got family up there. And I'd ask you best NBA food city. Just started off there.
I'm from Philly, so I'm a
Oh,
I'm not great with those questions, so I'm gonna be basic and just say Philly.
So you've been out there for a couple of days, like we said. Um, but let's talk about Clippers Media Day. You're getting it started out with the season Media Day, got that first day of class vibe. Um, what was it like, man? What Before I get into some of the questions you asked specifically and that players were asked specifically, just general vibes of Media Day. What was it like there?
Well, I categorize it as defiant. I categorize it as a group of players, not as much T. Lue, the head coach, but those players understand that they have fallen short of expectations with this era of Kawhi Leonard and Paul George being on the team. We're not in an era of basketball where guys that good get this long to play together when it's not their original team and they have not won together at the highest level. So uh, they are not being arrogant. They're not lashing back or saying they're being slept on. They are all very understanding of where they are and how they're being perceived, while at the same time they feel dedicated. And I'm not talking about just the stars. I'm talking about guys who've been there for a while, like Vince Zubats and Terance Mann. I'm talking about guys who just got there and Russell Westbrook. I feel like this team is motivated to really show what they're capable of doing as a full unit over the course of a full season, hopefully into the playoffs. Because the thing about the Clippers falling short of expectations is that they're not failing because these two guys, Kawhi and Paul, aren't good together or don't like each other. It's the complete opposite. Those guys are special together, and they are committed to winning for the franchise in ways that, again, are fleeting in today's NBA. It's a tragedy that they have not been able to stay healthy at the most important times, which is the playoffs. Like, we're talking about 2 years now, and it'll be three by time the playoffs start in 2024, that Kawhi and Paul have at least gotten to the second round of the playoffs with both healthy. You know what I'm saying? And I got to say, the second round, even though that 2021 team made the Western Conference Finals, because Kawhi tore his damn ACL in the middle of the semifinals that year.
Yep.
Tyronn Lue has never coached the playoffs like a postseason. This is his fourth season as head coach. He's never coached a postseason as the head coach where those two guys have finished healthy. And it's wasted time, you know. Last year would have been great because it's like as raggedy as that regular season was, as if they would have gotten Paul, Kawhi, Russell Westbrook into the playoffs healthy, you're getting information. You are understanding where you have failed, and you can still justify, okay, well, we can take another chance at it because they blew up the team outside the stars. They blew up the damn team, you know, in February. That's hard to do. You got 20 games left, and you got four new rotation players: Russell Westbrook, Bones Highland, Eric Gordon, and Mason Plumlee. Uh, Three of those four guys are now in their first training camp as Clippers. Eric Gordon's been replaced by KJ Martin. And that's the other side of the vibes of Media Day. I know these guys. There's one new guy out of 15 standard contracts. There's one new player who played for another NBA team at the end of last year. And that's a guy in KJ Martin who literally grew up here. Well, not here in Honolulu, but grew
Right.
up,
I
you
feel you.
know, not just grew up in LA, Southern California, but his dad, Kenyon, is, you know, a player who was with the Clippers at the tail end of his career. And to begin his career, was the number one pick in the draft by the New Jersey Nets, who had Lawrence Frankel on their coaching staff. And eventually Lawrence Frankel was elevated to the head coaching role. There's a lot of familiarity with guys. It reminds me of last year because John Wall was the only new standard contract guy. But the difference between this year and last year, everyone had high expectations and great vibes, not knowing that Kawhi's ACL recovery was going to impact at least the front end of the season. And then the back end, you had the catastrophic injuries to Paul first and then Kawhi. This year is an era of this is the last shot at it.
I love that you said they're humbled, man. I absolutely loved everything you said at the beginning of there and their
That's what I
mindset
keep thinking
coming.
about too. I keep thinking about that.
I was surprised by that answer. You know, it's like you rarely hear that in NBA players, and um, just going, especially going into camp and a team with this much talent. But like, my thing is, there's a little like I don't know how you say it, but like they're forces fighting each other. So you got this core group of guys, 4 or 5 guys that have been together for a couple of years, and you're right. It's rare that these guys are together so long with this much struggle, but yet you're changing some really important role players, but their role players have been so important because their stars have been hurt and they
Yeah.
have to go so deep into their bench, and so changing those in and out have been the information we're getting from Ty Lue, which is a really strange situation. Yeah, just trying to process all of that. But would you say most of the pressure is coming on these guys from Ballmer, or I mean, the outside, the team feels it from like a pressure standpoint?
I gotta preface that with whatever I say. With I think these guys respond to pressure better than most. Obviously, their biggest failure was the bubble in 2020, but that was another head coach ago and another version of the team ago as far as like leadership, culture, urgency, all of that. This team had to respond to pressure in the 2021 season, T. Lue's first year as the head coach. And that was pressure for T. Lue because he was on that staff in the bubble as an assistant. People were already clowning what's going to be different. I think T. Lue didn't get the respect that he should have deserved coaching those Cleveland teams. You know, everyone liked to say, oh, it's LeBron, LeBron, LeBron. Like, I mean, LeBron went to the Lakers and failed multiple times to make the playoffs. So it can't all be LeBron, right? So those guys respond to pressure well. Like Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, like those guys are not going to be dudes who overreact to pressure. I feel like those guys are poised. And T. Lue is someone who is poised as ever. He does not care what people say. Ballmer's going to have what he thinks should happen with the team he's always going to say they should challenge for a championship. They're never going to tank. He's the owner. He's supposed to raise expectations. These are professional basketball players that are veterans who a lot of them they've come close to winning a championship or won one. So they they should be able to handle pressure. They're pros. And so I think that the laymen, they look at pressure and they're ready for conflict, they're ready for scandal. And then you got these guys in particular, and I think pressure is a good thing for them because I expect them to respond to it, not fold under it.
Absolutely, man. I love that. I love that perspective on the guys as a group because, you have access to them when they're answering questions, but also, a little bit differently than that as well. You get to see a sneak into how they are and how they deal with these things. I also just kept thinking about that opening to your answer and what you addressed there. And I have to ask, and we'll get into on-court stuff, promise, but this is such a vibe checky team. Like, I need to know how things are feeling going into the year. Do you perceive them as seeing themselves as throwing themselves at the wall again? Or is this a group that feels refreshed and ready to take on the season anew? I think something that struck me from Knicks Media Day was how many times Tom Thibodeau stressed that anytime he was asked about the playoffs, anytime he was asked about Cleveland or Miami, anytime last season is not this season. It means nothing. It has nothing to do with this season. We're starting all over again. Does this Clippers group feel like they're starting all over again, or like they're throwing the same, what at the wall that has underachieved, even if they know themselves they're elite?
But man,
I
they
mean,
should be
Tom,
connected. They should feel connected a bit. They're leaders, and then you got Mann and Zubac. Like, feel like there should be a good chemistry, cohesion.
yeah, there's pros and cons to all sides of that. I'm not sure how much I agree with the characterization of throwing something up against the wall or insanity, right? Try doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But
Tweaks are
I can,
tweaks, and tweaks resulted in Giannis getting called the best player in the league, Jokic getting called the best player in the league. You got to break through once. You break through once, and
right. I honestly think that I'm fascinated by Tyronn Lue because he could have been extended this offseason. He wasn't offered one. He was guaranteed the final year of his original contract, which locks him in to a year where he's not a quote unquote lame duck, right? But it does make it so that like if this team doesn't do what they want or expect to do, then it's probably going to be a clean break next season. But no one's planning for failure. That's the thing about, a new NBA season. No one's lost the game yet. People like to say that. But like you're planning for success. You're not planning and to duck your head. And so I'm fascinated by what this team does differently with the same personnel at their disposal, with the information of the past. Tom Thibodeau can cap all he wants about how the Cleveland series or the Miami series won't influence this year. Uh, damn it, it does, especially in a market like New York. Them dudes ain't never won back to back playoff series, like back to back postseasons where they won in the playoffs in the 21st century, man. Like Tom knows that. So you are planning on improving, especially when you have so many of the same guys, improving and remaking your team. If you're the same team, even if you succeeded and you're the same team going into another year, then guess what? We all saw y'all on TV when other more than half the league was eliminated, which means guys are taking notes, even if they're mental notes, about how to beat you and how to bring you down as they try and ascend themselves into the next year. And you cannot, as a personnel executive, as a head coach, even with the same guys, and the Clippers have a lot of the same guys. They haven't made the trade. So there's so many of the same guys. You have to find a way to play different. You have to find a way to refresh your energy. You have to find some motivation because you can't keep saying the same damn thing. Your message gets stale unless you refresh yourself, find some energy. For T. Lue, he had the Team USA experience as an assistant. And no, that team was not successful at the end of the tournament. However, I think T. Lue being so far away from home and with a group of guys trying to achieve something on a coalition level, right? And getting that perspective, looking at different guys and different ways of playing. He's never had that before. He's never been on Team USA staff before. He feels and looks better about his outlook on things. And I'm not just saying this to someone talk. Don't matter what you say to me. You know what I'm saying? I'm media. What matters is what T. says to the public on one standpoint, because obviously we're in a business here, but it's the players who have to buy in. And that is what I'm interested in. They're going to be lining up different. They're going to have different emphases. You have Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook is not he's a plug and play standard cookie cutter player.
Like the least plug and play guy ever.
One of the least like, he's a unique basketball player who changes how other players around him play. He changes how coaches have to approach things. But that's a positive for Russ, whereas in the recent past, it hasn't been a positive. He's going to be able to get through to Paul George and Kawhi Leonard in a way that no other player has really been in position to do. Like John Wall was too far gone. Rajon Rondo was too long in the tooth. And everybody else was just inadequate to a degree. Like Eric Bledsoe didn't get a chance to play with Kawhi Leonard. Before Bledsoe got traded, Paul tore a ligament in his elbow. Bledsoe never had a chance to. Not that Bledsoe would have been a big difference maker, but he's the archetype of player that the Clippers have brought in and they didn't get the results because of circumstances that had nothing to do with Eric Bledsoe. You understand what I'm saying? Russell Westbrook is set up for success with these guys, if nothing else, because he's coming in at a time where Kawhi and Paul should be hitting the ground running. That's never been the case for any of the previous four teams with Paul and Kawhi on it. So there's a lot of newness that you can't look at last year and make assumptions about stuff. But at the same time, again, ain't nobody played no games yet. So, all this new stuff, it might not work. Who knows?
I'm glad we're talking with you, man, because I personally am one of those people that were just probably floating on the surface level way too much here with this team. And I truly just like to look at these guys as like the five I've been mentioning. Yes, because the Russell Westbrook, he had a lot of success without everybody together, of course. But like, I'm looking at it as the fact that Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are year 4. Terance Mann has been around a while. Zubac, Marcus Morris, and then Norman Powell. Those guys, like a bunch of them, are plug and play outside of Russ, in my opinion. So I feel like they really should be more connected versus a bunch of newness going into this. Are you saying you worry about Ty Lue connecting with these guys, or just the team in general gelling?
I'm not as concerned now as I was when last year ended when it comes to T. Lue. And a lot of that is just personality, man. Like last year was extremely frustrating for Tehran. And I feel like because of that frustration, certain things that T. Lue I used to never question, I started to question. The level of communication, the willingness to do what needed to be done to support the entire team. I didn't always see that. It felt like T. Lue was defined in a bad way pretty much from the winter on. And that wasn't a positive. A lot of that was out of T. Lue's control. Like the front office didn't set him up for success in the best way. I think the front office had good intentions. Front offices didn't go into the year being like, we're trying to screw over our head coach. It's just that and the front office acknowledged this too. That's how you get 4 new rotation players in February. That's how you get a front office that on the night of after the trade deadline, they're like, yeah, like we would want a point. We don't want a real point guard. We want a guy who can play complementary basketball with the stars. Someone who doesn't sound like Russell Westbrook. And then a week later, I'm saying, actually, the next day, I was like, Russ is trying to come to the Clippers, and it's just a matter of convincing the front office. And you know what? The front office listened, because the front office they do take into account what their head coach wants and needs. They do take into account what their stars are asking for. And so all the disconnect between the front office and the coaching staff, you know what, there's an air of truth to that, but there's also an understanding that there can be a disagreement while still keeping a culture of collaboration going. And so I think T. Lue media day, I've had 2 practice days. I think he had the time away and understanding that it's not just what you draw up. It's not just, who you're going to play. We still don't know who's going to play, but it does matter how you're communicating to players. It does matter what you're doing to put guys in position to succeed. And I think T. Lue has taken a step up in both of those efforts in early October before anyone's been able to kick anyone's ass yet. Um, and so that's what I'm looking forward to, really.
So real quick, and then Kris is going to ask some on court stuff here, but got to ask it while we're on personnel. We got Sean. So James Harden, where were we
Knew
at?
it.
How close did we get so far? And then Drew Holiday, was it ever close bringing Drew to LA? And then the last one I want you to touch on is Marcus Morris. So what the hell is going on there right now?
Actually, can I vote to wait on Marcus Morris? Because I want to talk about your question you asked him earlier. So just answer about the first two. Sorry. I'm going to cut in
Yeah.
and ruin
I
Zak's
mean,
question.
I mean, there's not a whole lot to say at this point, honestly. Drew's been traded. When the Clippers saw that Drew got traded to Portland, they were they were interested. They were probably close. And ultimately Boston had had assets that the Clippers didn't, or at least weren't willing to give up. I think Boston knew that they were probably wanting to move on from Malcolm Brogdon. We saw that because Malcolm almost got traded to the Clippers, right? So I think the
That
real
Will's a
flip was
trump
time.
card. Just ask Kris.
Yeah, I think the real swing factor was having a player like Robert Williams included too. Like Robert Williams is a special defensive player with durability issues, but also playing for a coach who doesn't value him as much as the previous head coach did. And that's not a criticism of Joe Mazzulla. That Celtics team was powerful, and Robert Williams was injured, so that and that team had to figure out how they were going to adjust with the crazy head coaching situation that put Joe Mazzulla in position to be the interim and ultimately the permanent head coach of the Boston Celtics. Joe leaned more into offensive basketball, um, ball movement and shooting, and you had 5 threats. You had Al Horford, Tatum, Brown, Derek White, Marcus Smart. 5 guys who can pass and shoot the basketball, and that's how the Celtics maintain their elite position in the Eastern Conference. Robert Williams came in as a complementary piece. So the Clippers, they didn't have all those pieces that they were willing to give up in a trade to get Drew. And that's fair. Now you shift your attention to someone like James, who's been trying to, you know, finagle his way to the Clippers for 3 months, the better part of the offseason.
Yep.
And I don't think that a move is imminent. I just don't. Like, a deadline passed with media day, and James is already co-toed and took himself to Colorado State for camp. This team, I think the front office has been pretty clear they don't want to give up certain pieces, and they don't feel like they have to. They understand that, you know, making a trade in October for a guy who, sure, there's some pros, there's some obvious cons. They're willing to let whatever James is doing with Philadelphia happen. They're who are they negotiating with? What other teams in the league are like, you know what, we really need James Harden? The Sixers don't have a trade partner right now, and the Sixers don't want a trade partner right now. If things hit the fan over the course of now between now and the holiday season, when more of the league opens up for trades, that's when we start to revisit this conversation. But I really don't see a scenario with where the Clippers are and where the front office is, where the coaches are. All these players are going to have different opportunities. This team, I looked at their schedule, they have a chance to start faster than they have in either of the previous 2 seasons. That's going to
Well,
color a lot of when we revisit whatever might happen with James and trade talks.
You really think it's Terance Mann holding this thing up though? Like,
Y'all got to understand,
you would think
Terrence
they'd be a
Mann.
little more desperate.
No, because there, and that's exactly my point. It doesn't make
They
sense for the
shouldn't be
Clippers.
desperate.
Exactly, they should not be looking at this like
But we've been
James is a championship or bust move, like because it's it's not the right idea from the individual player perspective. And Terrence is the kind of player where it's like that dude has a chance to start this year. And when I say chance, it's not locked in stone. I'm not even moving my depth
chance to
charts around
start.
right now. But Terrence Mann is the type of player. Honestly, when I was doing my Drew Holiday evaluation, I found myself saying, this dude is basically Terrence Mann with playmaking ability on both ends of the floor. Like Terrence isn't a high ceiling player. Terrence is a player who is not going to look for ways to beat you off the dribble every time down the floor. He's not a high level passer. He's not a guy. He's got one of the worst steal rates from a guy who plays the guard position. I don't even look at Terrence as a guard solely, and Terrence doesn't either. Terrence is one of those players who leans fully into the scam of positionless basketball, which is not criticism of Terrence. It's just my way of saying I hate that term with a passion, and I'm always going to say because it's like this:
Love it.
the game is not positionless as much as it was in the '90s. Like in the '90s, Dennis Rodman is a what 6'6" power forward. When Tony Kukoc was on the floor taking one of those centers off the floor for the Bulls, what position do you think he was playing? We can say the same things defining the game as far as guys not filling traditional roles several decades ago as you can say now, and that's why that stuff drives me crazy.
You're
What
like
you want
me
is
with
guys.
the narrative that the center position is dying. I think that
Yeah,
narrative
we
has been
literally when I was
spun.
at ESPN, we literally wrote that crap, and then we watched big men playing the 4 or the 5 interior, primary interior guys win the next 5 MVP awards. Giannis twice, Jokic twice, Joel Embiid. That's what I'm talking about. So it's like when you got a guy like Terrence Mann, Terrence is position versatile. He's capable of fulfilling roles at all 5 positions. And I like using and framing it that way because you have 5 guys on the floor. There might be some guys who are like that, who are versatile and whatnot across the positional spectrum, but you also have guys who are not. You have guys who they'll lie to you and tell you, I'm a basketball player. I don't have position. Then they walk out there and they can't dribble, pass, or shoot. So you get scammed into thinking that they're positionless and you can just throw them out anywhere. And turns out they're not an asset because they can't cook and they can't even eat and they can't they really they food on the other end of the floor too. No, you're looking for guys that complement each other, whether they're stars, whether they're role players. There's value in having point guards who know how to run an offense, who knows how to take care of the basketball. There's value in having your bigs who can protect the rim and finish when there's opportunities and screen and roll effectively. So I think you have to always consider that when you're building a team, when you have coaches and you have lineups that have to fulfill what you're trying to get out of every possession, game in and game out. So I know that was a bit of an unplanned rant, but like,
No, because
you
I
know,
love it. So
that's but anytime anyone brings up Terrence, it's like it's a normalization thing. No, Terrence is not a star. On the other hand, for a role player, he is a star. And the
But
Clippers probably underestimated and dismissed his piece of contributions and had him as a second or third stringer going into every regular season. I think that changes this year. And because that changes this year, I think his ability as a high floor player, a guy who never turns
mm,
the ball over, makes open shots, finishes at a high level, and defends across multiple positions, is able to impact the team's ability to win in the regular season. That's why you don't go desperate and be like, sure, we'll give you Terrence Mann when we're negotiating against nobody for a player that can
fair.
walk in a year.
yeah, I think in a vacuum, you're talking about, especially for the Clippers with Leonard and George. Okay, I understand wanting to add a Harden. I understand the playmaking. I get what
Yeah,
you're
it makes
saying,
sense. It
but
makes sense.
it's not a vacuum. It's the NBA. There's 30 teams. There's always
Yep.
context, and more context, and it affects everything. I want to circle back a little bit. Marcus Morris, I enjoyed watching you talk to him at media day. He answered your question quickly by kind of saying that there was no answer, that there, the answer was what you thought it was, one of those type of things. How do you think that is going? What did you make of that response of his, or
Been around
responses,
Mark.
I should say?
Yeah, but been around Marcus for a few years now. Like nothing he said in front of the microphone surprised me. Nothing he said outside of the microphone surprised me. Nothing about his demeanor surprised me. Like Marcus has been in the NBA for more than a decade. So he's been in major media markets. Okay. Like he's been in he's been in New York, right? Like he got he raised his value in a contract year in New York better than any other year or portion of a season in his career. That's how he got to the Clippers in the first place. So, before that, he was in Boston, a team with championship expectations, a team that exceeded expectations with guys were out, a team that fell significantly below expectations where guys were healthy. Like, he's from Philly. He mentioned that. I'm from Philly. Like, we're not from the same part of Philly. So, it ain't like I was around the block, but like I'm gonna tell you really like, yeah, Marcus probably would prefer that his situation was resolved and he wasn't on this team. He's making 18 million next year. And that's a lot for a player who might not play. And his production does not justify giving him the chances that he got, last year. I felt like Marcus played well last year for about a month. And then when Paul and Kawhi started missing time with injuries simultaneously, that's when Marcus started to fade. And it's just that there was really there wasn't a month really where he started to regress positively. And it was awkward. It was tough. I think that I said the team needed to look into moving one of the power forwards they had in January. They made a lot of moves that impacted every position except that one at the trade deadline. Like they brought in new wings, they brought in new guards, they brought in a center after not having a backup for Vince Zubats for the first 3 quarters of the season. But they didn't address power forward at all. And so I'm not sure what I still am keeping Marcus at the top of my depth chart, but only because when I do depth charts, I will always have the incumbent until it is explicitly stated by a coach or a front office executive or the player himself that they are not going to be in that same role. That has not explicitly been stated, but the writing is on the wall that there will be a starting lineup change. And then there's going to be competition. Marcus is here to compete. If all things are fair, he probably loses the competition. But he's on the team. He said all the things that I expected a guy who's still on the damn team to say.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it added up. Math was math. So I get you.
That's KJ Martin though, right? That's who's taking over.
No, I would be shocked if KJ won the starting job. KJ, I feel like, and again, this is what preseason is for. This is what training camp is for. This is what getting new guys implemented is for, is to see what guys can do and who they work well with. That's why I say players, this is basketball. Think tennis, you know what I'm saying? And even tennis got doubles, bro. Like you got guys who have to fit with other guys, and then you're playing against other guys. It ain't like you at the board and you're trying to you know, whoever does the math problem first is the best one. It's like, no, you are competing here. So like when you have all that in consideration, a guy like KJ in a vacuum, you're like, oh, why can't he start? He started damn near every game for the Rockets after they traded Eric Gordon to where the Clippers, of course, you know. But KJ has to catch up. KJ was on the most dysfunctional defensive program in the NBA to start his career. He has so
Maybe
much
worst
catching
coach
up
of
to
all
do.
time.
I'm not going to do that to Steven Silas because Steven Silas
I will.
is a
I won't make you.
Steven's a solid dude who walked into a really stupid situation. That dude was hired to coach James Harden and Russell
Facts.
Westbrook.
Facts.
And so yeah, like were there things Steven could have done a lot better? Of course. But Steven Silas is the type of coach who was asked to oversee such a dysfunctional situation. And so that did affect everybody. That affected a guy like KJ. On one hand, KJ got to play a ton of NBA minutes and got to show what he can do. I'm looking forward to seeing what he adds to the team in transition as a finisher, as a wing who can screen and roll, as a guy who can guard his man. But his off-ball defense needs to be caught up, and he's changing teams for the first time in his NBA career. The defense is the thing that young guys have to show that they can, you know, they can get down. And I think he's just going to be behind some other guys who are going to be competing for the same potential roles. I think KJ's going to play, but I don't. I'd be surprised if KJ would start. Like I said, I think Terance has the lead on guys who might be shaking that position up.
Yep. That's what I would think for sure. Obviously, but that would be my thought. KJ is someone I really liked in Houston. I thought a team should get him out of there, but I don't think starting would be, there. Teams have specific things they want to do, and you wrote a piece that just came out today, the day we're recording this, Wednesday the 4th, about a goal that the Clippers seem to have pretty definitively. The New York Knicks last season had 3 specific goals in regards to their 3-point shooting. Top 10 in the league in attempts, top 10 in the league in makes, and then average efficiency or better. So league average. It's all about relative to the rest of the league. And it seems to be kind of similar here. Top 5 defense. That seems to be the goal. Kawhi Leonard said it. Tyronn Lue said it, as you wrote. Can you talk about that a little bit, expand a bit, and not to, just say your article, but give a little
Oh,
teaser
I
to
don't do
our.
that. Y'all got to read the damn thing.
I know, that's what
And
I'm
I'm
saying.
glad that you did.
Give a little teaser for our audience.
First of all, I love that you bring up Tibbs and what his specific goals were, because I remember my first season at the Athletic covering the Clippers back in 2021 when the Knicks were good, but they were arguably the like least they're the most adverse 3-point averse team in the league, uh, certainly from a volume standpoint. And Tibbs obviously went to change that. That's what I mean by like, look, even some of these coaches who have been in the league in decades, they weren't coaching the same way now than when they started. Greg Popovich, he hates threes, but he also coached a 2014 Spurs champion, Kawhi Leonard, as the Finals MVP. That was the first team in NBA history to attempt more threes and free throws, like first time ever. Now that's like, it's hard to get teams to get to the free throw line more than they attempt the 3-pointers. So when it comes to the Clippers defense, they actually came out of camp. They had training camp in Vegas, went to Seattle for 2 preseason games. They came out and they were great defensively. They were stellar. Now, part of that was because 9 of their first 20 opponents ultimately didn't even make the damn play-in tournament. So, maybe there's some strength of schedule going on there, but you still got to execute. We'd have a bigger problem if the Clippers were like league average against that same slate, right? So it means a lot when you're second in the NBA in defensive efficiency at the 20 game mark. Now, they established that ceiling and then they fell all the way off, and it was the worst defense in the Kawhi PG era. And it was mainly because there was just so much going on from guys who they thought were going to help them, and it didn't help. Like Norman Powell, I don't mean to single Norm out, but like Norm was in some lineups that they thought Norm would hold down, and he wasn't able to do it. John Wall, they brought him back as the backup to Reggie. John defensively was probably struggled more than he did offensively. Luke Kennard is a player that you got to hide. Not having a backup center, Zoo was great to start the year, but eventually when his rim protection kind of declined over the start of the winter, that's when the Clippers weren't as good defensively anymore. And it's not like they had another guy to spell him until late February. And then Zoo was hurt in the game where the Kings scored 176 points. That's where you're like, oh, if it's Zubac's kind of matters for us because Mason Plumlee, he might be another big, but now you have the same situation, not having an adequate second unit big with a guy in Mason who, let's just be real, Charlotte Hornets, they took off defensively after they started Mark Williams and Nick Richards instead of Mason Plumlee. So, defense is hard as hell to play in the 2023 version of the NBA. You saw last season, right? That was the most efficient offensive season in the play-by-play era. And it's not an accident. Teams are just getting smarter at what they want to do. But the thing that people need to stop and get off the video games for is, yes, it's a three-point heavy league. The process of getting to those shots varies so much across the league. I never played Pokemon, but if I did, I'd know that there's some that are, they go have better matchups against other ones, right? So like you got some teams that are ball dominant, they're ISO heavy.
Yep.
Everybody runs spread pick and roll, but the volume of that spread pick and roll varies. The Golden State Warriors, they hate running pick and roll, The Golden State Warriors don't like to do anything that involves, bigs doing anything that's not a split cut, Like you got the Denver Nuggets just won the damn championship. They were the post heaviest team in the NBA. Forget driving. What the hell you need to drive for? Just get the ball to Joker. So there's a lot of ways where defensively you can say, okay, they're going to be better. How you got to identify what you're trying to do, what you're willing to give up, right? And so the Clippers, the thing that they're going to give up, there's not a defense in the league that is great at everything. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think, if they weren't the best, they were close to the best defense in the league. I think Cleveland might have been number one. If you're Milwaukee,
Yep.
Milwaukee is like number one against shots, number one against, keeping teams off the free throw line, number one in defensive rebounds, dead last in forcing turnovers. You watched a Bucks game, you rarely saw them actively trying to force turnovers, but there's a correlation there. As bad as they were forcing turnovers, they were great at defending without fouling. They were huge. They had Brook Lopez protecting the rim, Giannis as a help guy, and the entire edict was we're not fouling. We're not giving away those points. The Clippers are very similar. They're not as extreme with the whole correlation between defending without fouling versus forcing turnovers, but they've been consistently good at defending without fouling. And they've been consistently preaching being physical and having longer guys. And so when Kawhi and Paul are playing, it's like having a top five defense. The issue is the other guys, not when one of those guys are playing, obviously. But even when Kawhi and Paul played, you think of the Claw and you think of PG as this guy who probably has a lock icon in NBA 2K or whatever. They were actually worse forcing turnovers with those two guys on the floor than they were when one of those guys or both were off. Those are indicators of, okay, we're understanding what they're trying to do defensively. And so now it's leaning into, what the personnel is, what the scheme is to achieve that more consistently. And it's going to be fascinating. It's also a reminder that how they start defensively is not an indicator of how they'll finish. And it's about being consistent throughout the course of an 82-game season. Absolutely. And we won't know the answers to that until the spring.
Oh, my man, that was an amazing rant.
There's fire. There's like around the horn. Like there's fire coming on the screen right now.
Man, y'all call the boss, man. I let you know.
I love it. No, that's what we wanted, man. That's what we wanted. And honestly, like I can just visualize you painted a great picture, and just you can try to look at the team's stats and synergy and all these things. With the Clippers, it's like the team that's the biggest outlier in the NBA because all the moving pieces, games played together. And I truly believe that, and different sample size from regular season to playoffs.
This is why I said earlier, they're a big vibe check team coming into the season. Like that matters more to me.
Yeah, and there's a lot of outside noise. A lot of outside noise too to go along with that. So let's wrap up with this. I mean, they won 44 games last year. They flamed out in the first round. honestly, you mentioned defense is a big question mark, and you brought up Jokic. I think that's the biggest question mark for me, even if they're perfectly healthy as the season goes. The best case scenario, and that's how I like to look at things. I mean, we know what the worst case is. I mean, this team
Do
relies
we?
on health more than just about any team. I mean, there's always rock, but some people
That's
believe
what
you
I'm
can just
saying.
keep
Like,
digging and
we
digging.
never, can we be real? I was just talking about this week. The Clippers have never bottomed out, man, in the last dozen years in the NBA. They
It's
have
happening
won at
after this
least
one if they don't.
they've won at least 42 games, or the 82 game equivalent of 42, because obviously we've had a lockout, which is when this streak of winning seasons began,
Yep.
and we've obviously had pandemic influenced seasons. But this team has had a winning record for 12 years in a row. Like, no other team has got an active streak that long. We have not seen them bottom out. I've seen them come close the last 2 years, but we haven't seen them bottom out. I am less sure about how bad things can get, as opposed to how good things can get. I've seen this team in the Western Conference Finals shorthanded. Okay, all anyone in that organization, the owner, the front office, the head coach, the stars, the guys who've been trying to back up these stars as role players, all they want is for Kawhi and Paul to get through a season with T. Lue as the head coach in one piece. We have not seen
Oh,
that,
the basketball
and
world wants it, man. I'm thirsty. We're all hungry.
I mean, some people are already off the ship. They are acknowledging that. Paul George said Wednesday in practice, we don't deserve to be complaining about being overlooked. So I think that team, it's easier to see them with their ceiling than it is to see them fall out and completely fail. We have not seen that. They've been closer to success than they have been to abject failure. Obviously, we can have the Giannis Antetokounmpo interpretation of failure, right? Like, failure is, you can find failure everywhere.
All right,
Now
we'll
we're in
save
the era
that one.
now where guys win championships and we can fail. I saw Richard Sherman go on TV today and say Mike Malone going to be irrelevant with his one championship with a franchise that never won before. Some producer thought that was cool to like let go. So look, we're in an era where you can win a championship and they'll still find a way to say that you failed. So failure is like super accessible. Success is not. And so like the team is planning for success. They certainly have the two guys and the head coach that can lead them there. If we see this team like even have a 41-41 record, that will be their worst in 13 years, right? And so you can see where I'm getting at. Like, you know, there's probably not another team in the league with a greater variance of what their ceiling and what their floor is. And
I agree to that.
that makes things
Just with health.
intriguing.
So then let's get a prediction out of you. I like putting you on the spot to wrap up with that. I'm gonna say 48 wins. They'll come in as like a 4 seed or so, and I'm gonna say they'll make the second round. I'm not predicting anything further than that because of health and all that jazz. But I think that's my pick for right now.
It's a little early for me to make hard predictions that I will stick with, because when I make my
Oh, I
real
don't hold you to
predictions,
anything. Just holding a
I
gun to you
do.
right now.
When I make mine before the end of the month, before the start of the regular season, um, I hold on to it. Like, and I will tell you, because I'm big on like measuring, what happened versus what I thought would happen. And so I'm not I'm not going to plant a flag, but this team should win 50. And I don't know where that'll place them. There's a lot of teams in the West that I don't like. To be honest with you, like, I don't think the top of the West is as good as people think it will be. Um, like, it was not very impressive last season, and I think a lot of those teams that were really good aren't going to be as good. And so at the same time, I think the floor of the West is going to be higher. The Spurs will be better because they have Wemby. The Rockets will be better because they're well, they have some veterans and they have a head coach who knows what he's trying to
A
get out of
dog.
those
He's a
veterans
dog.
and out of those young guys. Like their offense is going to be pretty terrible, but they're going to defend. Fred VanVleet's going to defend. Dylan Brooks is going to defend. Jabari Smith is going to be put in position to be impactful. Ime Udoka is, again, like defensively, they're not going to be a walkover like they've had been. So they're going to naturally be better, even if they have a bottom five offense, which I safely feel like they're going to be able to have five offense. This is going to be, I don't know who's making a shot for that team, but they're going to compete. That's my whole point. Utah and Dallas should have, they could have made the play-in tournament. They both, one more blatantly than the other, but they both ejected from trying to make the play-in tournament for draft consideration reasons. Portland is probably safely below, but Portland has young guys and veterans who are going to compete, and a head coach who really is going to try and compete in Chauncey, at the end of the day, Chauncey's got to keep his job. It's going to be tough to be a Western Conference team in the free in-season tournament championship game portion of the season. That covers about 6 weeks, about 20 games. So that being said, though, I think the Clippers can finish top 4, 50 wins, and I think a conference finals appearance is something that I'm going to say I think they can achieve it. I'm not willing to, like I said, I'm not willing to plant a flag on that, but I'm also not willing to go above any of those things as far as 50 wins, a 4 seed, and two playoff series wins.
Gotcha. I would say for myself, over in Sin City, they got it at 46.5. I would go over. I agree with you both there. I think that line bakes in a lot of injury concern that, obviously it's a bet, right? You are trying to guess what's going to happen. I like to be optimistic. So I think they're much better than that if they are healthy. So I'm going to go over. Law, man, you came on here and spat knowledge. Thank you so much for joining us, not only on the road, but at a busy time of year, for giving us the insight you did, the perspective you did. And I was really, really impressed with you as an NBA historian, man. You know your stuff, and I love it. Thank you so much. I sometimes I underappreciate in articles because it's like you can look stuff up, but I've written and I'm always looking and basketball referencing, but you have it all on the top of your head, and that's ludicrous. So all the flowers to you, man, and thank you so much.
Hey, I appreciate you guys for, like I said, saying with me. And it's always fun to talk. It always is. I remember somebody was talking last month about how they don't like doing these things, and maybe what, that dude probably got make more money than me. But I love talking hoops. So when I got the time, I'm blessed to join in. So appreciate you guys.
Appreciate you, bro. And it's been fun watching your coverage grow. So keep grinding, and hopefully give you something to cheer for this year and actually have some fun with. So we'll catch you later and have a good one.
Hey man, I'm an NBA writer. I know I
I
cover
was gonna
one
say
team in
something
particular,
tells
but
me
I'm not
You know your shit.
I'm
Yeah.
I
I'm
was
I'm going to, don't get me in trouble now, but I'm going to enjoy this season, whatever happens.
yeah, so I was gonna say something tells me Law would have fun covering the Ron Baker Knicks. So, I think it's just about basketball and about watching those
Easy, bro.
those those
My
48 minute
Ronnie
favorite,
games.
Ronnie
my
Bakes.
favorite thing about Ron Baker, him playing, which I say with Fred VanVleet, and everybody was like, Ron Baker looked like a dude named Fred VanVleet, and Fred VanVleet looked like a dude named Ron Baker.
Two friends of the show there. Had both those guys on,
Love
and
it.
entertaining dudes.
Awesome. Well, Law, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a
All
great one,
right.
man, and good luck with the rest of camp and the upcoming season.
Hey, appreciate you guys. I'm going to knock this hot spot out. Peace out.
Later. Peace.